this is Nicholas D. Simone reporting for Main Street Victory News. We're here at the Ritz 5 movie theater in Philadelphia on May 22nd, 2016. The film is screening here today is Vaxxed, and we're going to try to get some interviews in with some of the directors, Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and some of the producers that are going to be inside that are going to be giving a Q&A session afterwards. The film is detailing about how the CDC covered up some autism link to the MMR vaccine. So we're going to take a look inside and see if we can get some maybe interviews before the screening, and stick around for the Q&A afterwards.
Thank you very much indeed for coming. It's a great pleasure to be here. We're going to really move straight to questions because we often don't get through all the questions. I just want to say that what this film is about, it's not about me, and it's not about being anti-vaccine. It's about the worst medical and scientific fraud in the history of the world. It's also about honouring and acknowledging the parents, families and children affected by vaccine damage and autism. With that, I want to introduce my great friend Sheila Ely, star of the show, as you saw, and Polly Tommy, producer, also star of it, and we will take your questions, so please. Yes?
How you doing? My name is Nicholas D. Simone. I'm an independent journalist for Main Street Victory News, and I just wanted to thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate the film, and it was very riveting and enlightening. So I'd first like to start off by just saying that I don't personally believe in vaccines. I'm really not on one side or the other, and I wouldn't take any. So I just wanted to make that clear to the audience. So I'm not really on one side or the other. So obviously we know that the mainstream media is afraid of the information in this film getting out because that means disastrous consequences for the pharmaceutical, medical, industrial complex and their corrupt practices and their profits. However, a smear campaign was just released against this film and the makers, including yourselves, by the Washington Post. I don't know if you saw it. It was just released May 19th. In the article titled Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe, Closer to Horror Film Than Documentary. And I'd like to note that they quote by saying, the ace in the hole of Vaxxed is presumably CDC researcher William Thompson. Thompson never appears on camera, but we are treated to extensive yet highly edited recordings of his voice made without his knowledge, as the filmmakers admit. In a rare example of full disclosure, in these recordings, Thompson seems to be alleging that the CDC team that looked into the autism vaccination link and found none cooked the books containing their findings. So my question is, how can this attest to the validity of Thompson's information and role in this film if it was made without his knowledge?
The film, well, let me put it this way. If Thompson wasn't playing to a crowd, he was just honestly telling his story. He was acknowledging what had happened to Brian Hooker. The recordings were legally recorded. Had he known he was being recorded, he could have just played it up. He could have been dishonest. He could have told the story. He didn't even know he was being recorded. That makes it actually far more credible, far more honest than if he had not done so. The film, everything in this film is 100% accurate. The editing, there is absolutely no editing that takes anything that he said out of context. This film has been shown to Dr. Thompson and to his lawyer. It is completely transparent. The full transcripts of what he said in those recordings are available in a published book, so anyone can compare the edit with what is actually said in the context of the full conversation.
Okay.
And I would say to those who are in this film and who we have called out, if there is anything in this that is inaccurate, sue us. Get on and sue us. And I'll tell you why they won't. Because it is 100% accurate, and defamation proceedings are about discovery. And we would get discovery, and the CDC does not want discovery, because that would be their downfall.
Thank you. One more thing, though. I do recognize that the one example in the isolated autism segment in the film that demonstrated the woman's baby was exhibiting seizures only a few hours after the vaccine. However, are there any third variable factors that were also measured for and considered such as maybe GMOs, pesticides, electromagnetic fields, or even the 20-plus vaccines that are given prior to the MMR vaccine before the CDC recommended MMR vaccine by age 12 or 12 months. That could have maybe contributed to autism from the time the MMR vaccine was administered and the time of regression observed and reported from your research?
It's a very good question. So are there other cofactors that play into a child
That's all I have.
developing an adverse reaction to a vaccine? The answer is undoubtedly yes. This looks at timing of exposure, but prior exposures to neurotoxic or immunotoxic vaccines could play in. GMO crops, glyphosate, the herbicide that's put on 90% of the food products in this country, absolutely. The data that we had in this film was provided to us in the context of a specific MMR study. We stuck precisely to the facts of that, avoided any kind of speculation beyond that. So this is really about just that fraud. It's not trying to say this is the single cause of autism. It's not saying that at all. This is a story about CDC fraud. So that's what we've confined ourselves to.
Okay, all right, thank you, I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
So,
Which one were you with? Who were you with?
Nicholas, yeah, Main Street Victory. So we're just
Main Street
independent,
Okay.
news journalism.
Yeah, good,
And
good for independent news.
yeah,
journalism.
absolutely.
What
I
do you
mean,
think
yeah, we're the people that
You
get
don't
out there
any
and get the
funding
truth.
from pharma.
That's why one of the first things I said was about the
Yeah.
mainstream media, and I understand. Like I said, I saw that Washington Post article, and I saw that they were smearing you immediately by the wording they were using, calling this like a horror film, saying like what else is bad that that you're going to put out or whatever. So I understand, and I wasn't trying to say that
No,
to
no,
kind
no,
of,
no, that's fine.
like I said, I'm not really on one side or the other. However, I would never get a vaccine. I feel like I'm fine the way I am, and I'm not really interested. But the one thing I wanted to ask is, one thing I was reading in the article too, and I was already aware of, is that this film was supposed to be a part of the Tribeca Film Festival, along with Robert De Niro and the festival founder. And I was just wondering, so it got pulled, right? According to some scientific community meeting that they had. Do you know what happened in that meeting that made them pull it?
We have no idea. We don't even know whether there was such a meeting. That's the first I've heard of that. What I heard, I mean, firstly, it was seen by De Niro and his wife and the Tribeca committee. They liked it. They approved it. It was an official selection. We were delighted. And next thing we hear is that it's been pulled from the festival. Then we heard from the organizers of the festival, Jane Rosenthal, who is Robert De Niro's partner, that they had come under corporate pressure from their sponsors, the Sloan Foundation with pharmaceutical industry connections, and that was the reason it was pulled. That was what we were told. And then they said that they got other scientists involved to give them an opinion on the film, scientists who'd never reviewed Dr. Thompson's documents or anything to do with it. We were never told what their complaints were with the film. We were never given an opportunity to redress. They pulled the film, and that's what, that was the consequence of corporate pressure on an independent film festival, which is the death of independent film festivals. Mm-hmm. Once you start responding to your sponsors saying this is what you'll play and this is what you won't play, then you become a propaganda machine. Mm-hmm. So the consequence of that is then Robert De Niro got really fed up, really angry, because he didn't want to be part of that process. He was furious that the film had been pulled, and he came out on the Today Show and said, everybody should see this film, and I'm going to look into the reasons why it was pulled. They then came up with all this cockamamie stories about why it was pulled. Other film producers were threatening to pull out. That was just utter nonsense.
Right.
Who, as a filmmaker, is going to, having been selected for one of the best film festivals in the world, is going to say, well, if you don't take that film out, I'm going to take mine home. Give me a break. So they sort of confabulated about what the precise basis of their withdrawing the film was. But basically, it was a huge mistake for them. The one thing it did do is to launch this film onto the world stage as the most talked about, the most controversial documentary in a very, very long time, and that clearly gave some traction. We then played in New York. We had 3 days to release at the Angelica Theatre in New York,
Right.
And now it's going all over the country and all over the world. It's the first American documentary to play in China. So we will go down in the annals of advertising as there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah.
But so many reviews have been written by Paul Offit down the road here at CHOP, who's obviously never even seen the film. He's written such nonsense about the film. It's preconceived, contrived bias, written by, and most of them, the New York Times article, the Washington Post, written by people who've never seen the film. So really, it's pathetic. And that's just what we've got to live with. But we know they're frightened. They're really, really frightened of this film.
Yeah, and that's one thing I noticed, like some of the people I was talking to too were already saying like negative things about it, and I was like, did you even see it yet? So my next question is, segueing from that, is how do we get like these pro-vaxxers, right? What would you say to them, right, to try to get them to come out here and at least see it, to maybe see if their opinion can just maybe be influenced either one way or another?
I would say you're a grown-up. This is the United States of America, right? This is not a religion. This is science. Do not be told what you will see, what you will believe, what you will read, all right? Grow up. Behave like an adult. Come and see this film. See it for what it is, which is not anti-vaccine, but it's about the biggest, the greatest fraud ever committed in the history of medicine and science by a government agency which put millions of children at risk. Come and see the film. Do not dare to comment on it without having seen it. If you don't like it having seen it, that's fine. You're perfectly entitled to your opinion, but do not behave like a 10th grader and, run out of the sandbox because you're not being played with properly, or you're not getting what you want, how you want it, when you want it. Come and see this film, get informed, and then have an opinion.
And like you said, it's not about pro-vax, it's about the fraud that you were talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you for your work. And if you don't mind, I'd like to get a picture with you before
Sure,
I go. Is that
absolutely,
fine?
let's do
Okay.
that, yeah.